Alright, so hi, I'm Guda, and I'm here to show you my dual ranged attack totem critical strike bow build. So I had a bunch of characters. One of them was 1900, and I asked for suggestions what to do with all the free respecs that all the characters got when the latest patch was made. And one of them was this dual ranged attack totem build submitted by Oregon Crete. So I did it, and this is about the best I can do. I haven't gotten as much survivability as I probably should. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 health nodes that I'm right next to, and then 50% evasion, 50% armor, 50% armor. So the survivability isn't the best, but as far as damage goes, this is basically endgame damage to see what a dual ranged attack totem crit bow build would do. And I think I've got most of the links down and skills that it should use down correctly, along with the itemization. And this is about as good as I could do. I could get some better items. Theoretically, it could do about 3 times the damage if you had like a perfect bow and items, but overall everything's pretty good. Damage isn't the best, but it's okay. Got a mountain ledge, just gonna run it white. So yeah, I was gonna focus on doing crit, and you know, obviously this being a dual totem build, there's a lot of free time. So, you know, hopefully I can, you know, maintain power charges. Even with the best crit chance on a bow, you'll be hard-pressed to get more crit chance per hit than second form Ice Spear will do. So, getting power charges with power charge on crit is... That'll raise the crit chance. So if you don't know how totems work, all totems do is copy the skill that they would cast it as if you were using it. So I've linked, this is my multi-target attack, it's just lightning arrow, and as you can see right now it shoots out 2 arrows. That's because I'm using the Death's Harp unique bow. Get off my back, these goat men. Oh my god. Not off to a good start. Okay, so as you can see, the totem shoot out 2 arrows with the Death's Harp equipped. But if I weapon swap, it immediately switches over to shooting out 1 arrow. And that's exactly how totems work. They copy the attack as if you were doing it. So, you know, if you're ever confused about how like weapon swapping and stuff works, it simply works exactly as if you were using the totem to, or if you were using that skill yourself without a totem, regardless what you had equipped at the time. So, I use the Death's Harp in one hand, and that gives me a free multiple projectile, effectively. So that helps out with clearing out crowds a bit. But the Death's Harp doesn't have the best damage or attack speed, but it gets a free arrow. So I can use a 4 link and yeah, this, and it's basically a free 5 link. I'm scaling elemental damage, so the physical damage I'm doing doesn't really, I don't really care about that on the bow. It would be kind of useful if I had a much better bow, then I would consider using lesser multiple projectiles. You know, also a 5 link bow would be pretty good, but you know, this works okay with the Death's Harp. Since I'm also scaling crit damage, the Death's Harp has a pretty awesome crit multiplier to it. It has a 100% crit multiplier. So when it does crit, it'll do crazy damage. Yeah. So I have two main totems. There's lightning arrow, that's mainly for crowds, and then elemental hit. So elemental hit's mainly for single targets and rares, and usually I'll weapon swap with it because my alternative bow is much stronger and it has a higher crit chance. Bows have a paltry 5% chance to crit, like most weapons do. And this bow has an increased crit strike chance. It could be much better, but this is, you know, the best one I had around for the build. So the damage on it doesn't matter that much. Like, it can have a lot of elemental damage, but since we have auras, so that adds a lot of damage, anger adds a lot of damage, and the Wake of Destruction boots, which adds a lot of damage. Then you can get damage off of your amulets, rings, and quiver. The damage the bow does is not quite as significant as it might seem. So yeah, when it crits, it does quite a lot of damage. And that's without crit weakness. That guy was immune to curses. So without the I guess I should explain a little bit more. So with the Death's Heart, I have a lower crit chance, but I have a much higher crit multiplier. I felt this was an okay trade-off. Let's go to Lightning Arrow. So I have like a 600% crit multiplier. I felt this was an okay trade-off because if you're dealing with groups, doing irregular damage is okay. So like it has a lower crit chance, but when it crits, it smashes the whole group. And then for single target, doing like consistent damage, I think, was more, I don't know. So this has a much higher crit chance and then a lower crit multiplier, so it does slightly more regular damage. I don't really know which setup's better, but the Death's Harp is still a pretty nice bow for this, I found. The other one that I was considering using was actually the Infractum, a bow that no one really has a good use for, I think. But it has 100% chance to pierce, but you can't leech. So I don't care about leeching because I have totems. I don't care about my life. But the free pierce would give it free AoE as well. So that was another alternative to the Death's Harp. I didn't think it worked quite as well because positioning your totems and having them attack the correct enemy was a bit more difficult than just shooting it yourself. So I also have Poison Arrow. The only reason I'm using Poison Arrow is because I still can. It still does damage even though you're dual totem, because for some reason I'm using the skill, but the Poison Cloud is applying the damage. I'm not applying the damage. I don't know. You can still use Poison Arrow. I also still have Ice Shot equipped with increased duration and blood magic. So Ground Ice is actually really strong. It is guaranteed chill as long as enemies are standing in it. So they move a little bit slower and provide some extra defense for me and my totems. Yeah, so unlike Spark Totems, ranged attack totems still need to be alive to do damage. Like Spore Totems, they just shower out tons of sparks and they just bounce around the room and fill the room with sparks and then everything dies. What the? Coming out of left field, bro. Is that? I don't know. Get them, turrets. Wow. Them crits.
My mana is gone.
Yeah, so when the totems crit, it can basically take a blue down to half health. And that's decently strong. I wouldn't call that damage too amazing, but it works pretty well. You know, in any free time I have, I can just shoot Frenzy and get some Frenzy charges, because the totems attack simply as if you were using the skill yourself. It's not based off when you cast it or whatever. So, you can cast a totem, and by the basis of collecting Frenzy charges, it changes how the totem works. So you can get a little bit extra damage off of it, just from the increased attack speed. It's also linked to power charge on crit, so it's occasionally I'll use Frenzy, crit, and then I might get a power charge as well. And since I'm scaling crit as well, it's just a little extra bonus. Alternatively, I can use Ice Spear simply for the amazing animation, because, I mean, oh yeah, I gotta use the Super Saiyan bow. But I mean, that's glorious. Clap your hands! Raise the roof! Yeah. Items. So, that was... Anyways! So, when kind of used correctly, this build doesn't... Yeah, there's kind of there's enough going on. It's not like my summoner where there was so much shit going on all at once. It was just atrocious to use. But this character, I think, has enough to do without being boring, even as a dual totem build. Because I can, there's endurance charges, I can keep frenzy charges for a little bit extra damage. It's not really necessary, though. And then, you know, I can freeze guys, or chill them with the ice shot. And then I can always use Poison Arrow to give it a little bit of extra damage over time. And it all kind of works together pretty well. Wow. As I said, the survivability would probably be better. This is pretty much endgame damage. There's not a whole lot of other damage notes to grab. There's 15% crit, and besides getting better, well, I guess there's some of these, but since there's already so much projectile damage and increased elemental damage already in the tree, it's not going to add that much extra damage. It'll add some, but it's not going to be... I don't think it's worth the 3 points until, like, the very last 3 points you get. So... swap, curse, roll back. As I said, the survivability would probably be better if you weren't simply going for endgame damage, because I really want to see like how viable something like this would be. Besides getting better items, this is basically the best it's going to do. And I think it can do twice as much damage with like maybe 3 times with like the best gear. Yeah, but it's okay for right now. Since I have Iron Reflexes, I'm still sort of tanky. So I can use, you know, Enduring Cry and run around in circles. And instead of having my totems die. So I can do that. Yeah, the crits are really where the damage comes from. Ooh, fuse. Fuse it up! Where's the next pack? Because we use totems, I don't think survivability is that big of an issue. Like, I could definitely get some more hit points, but overall I think it's still fairly defensive on the basis of it being dual totems. Like, the goatmen come out of nowhere, obviously, but Yeah, then crits. So my resistances aren't that great, but I haven't properly geared out this character because I really didn't want to waste a whole lot of time on him. Like, I leveled him up some, but gearing him out, like, specifically for Endgame is not something I really felt was... I didn't really think I would play this character into, like, the super Endgame, like, into, like, 70 and 70 plus maps. But he works okay for right now. So as for the links I'm using, it's basically on both totems, they're basically the same thing. I'd prefer it if I could use a 6-link armor as well, because then I could have both totems actually hooked up to the same skill. So elemental hit is used because the DPS on this isn't actually correct. Like the 16-16665. That's not actually correct, because it doesn't add in the base damage that elemental hit would add anyways. So the damage is like twice as much, effectively. So, you know, even though it says it's a little bit better than Lightning Arrow, it's actually a lot better than Lightning Arrow. But Lightning Arrow does AoE, because it hits 3 near targets. So even without Chain or GMP, you know, I have 3 extra projectiles from the Death Sarp and some AoE from the Lightning Arrow skill. Cold Shot is an alternative to Lightning Arrow, but even though it has higher tooltip damage, the way it does AoE I didn't think was quite as good. It didn't really feel better. So that's how this guy works. It works all right. Yeah, we're clear here. So as for links, it's just ranged attack totem, additional accuracy, weapon elemental damage, and faster attacks. But if I had perfect gear, I could ditch additional accuracy and maybe use lesser multiple projectiles or something, or increased crit multiplier. Preferably, if I had a 6-link, I could put both skills in the same link and have 2 5-link skills and then an extra 4-link to do something else with. But I don't really want to consider a 6-link scenario, because I think that's out of the scope for most people to deal with. So that's pretty much how this guy works. You know, there's Frenzy, Poison Arrow, Ice Shot for slow, During Cry to distract monsters from attacking the totems, some Power Charge on crit, you know, Weapon Swap for Curse, and yeah, that's basically it. When I look at my gear, it's a lot of crit multiplier and an extra arrow. A lot of evasion. It's basically just the most defensive 5-link I had that had like the correct sockets I could roll. And then crit multiplier and elemental damage, random ring. So elemental damage, Nalagaros for crit chance and multiplier, random belt in the Wake of Destruction. And that's basically how this build works. I don't think it's quite that strong. I think there's a much better use for ranged attack totems. I think going all the way over here in the tree is not quite worth it. Because there's the really, really strong bow crit chance and the really, really strong bow crit multipliers over here. I think a better use of it would actually be to have a wand in your offhand and potentially go over here and get the assassination tree. It's still called assassination. It is called assassination. So grab the assassination tree and some more crit over here and maybe pass through the middle. And I think that might be a better scenario because wands have a super high crit chance as it is. Like you could find wands with a 10% base crit chance. An elemental hit works with both bows and wands. So you could weapon swap and the totem wouldn't simply go away. So you could have like a lightning arrow in your bow, and then if you found a single target, you could lay down elemental hit totems, and then like finally when you felt single target would be stronger for attacking the group with, weapon swap, the totems would still exist, and they would have a much higher crit chance.
It would be wrong to do that here.
Shut up. They would have a much higher crit chance, and yeah, they could be a lot more effective, and the wand could possibly be a lot better than the Death's Harp, perhaps, if you were still wanting to use that. So that's a potential for another use of dual ranged attack totems. The real question is why you would want to go dual or double totem in the first place. And the reason is the mana cost of using two totems or using a totem is far less than casting the skill yourself. Totems by nature do less damage and they have a reduced attack speed, but with like the 40% less damage, if they attack 6 times, they've recouped the mana cost of casting the totem. Because if you were to cast it, well, with the mana cost multiplier and the reduced damage, you know, it takes like 6 casts for it to be equivalent as if you were casting the skill yourself like 3 times for like mana cost of damage that was done. So if you had like a really fast attacking bow or whatever, they could attack an average of 6 or more times. Going totem on it is going to be more mana efficient than not going totem. So you can have a really small mana pool without a lot of regeneration. Like I only have 20 mana regeneration, and I can basically spam totems as much as I want. And yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think there's much else to cover. What could I be missing? Oh yeah, don't take resolute technique. This build doesn't use it because there's crit, so I have to get accuracy without resolute technique. That's basically it. I don't know. I think I'm done. What is this stuff?
Hello.
It's useless to me.